Today we ask the age-old question again. I should have got out the magic 8 ball, but can the Calgary Flames pick a direction and stick to it?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto of Offside News and the Win Column. Thank you so much for joining me and making the show part of your day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today, I thought that we could really examine where the Flames are at in terms of where they were a year or two ago in this retooling, rebuilding process, but also kind of look at what's gone on to the point where they can't decide which way they actually want to go and how that is impacting the star talent that they're drafting now. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. And let's dive into this. Because this is Craig Conroy's third season as the Calgary Flames general manager. Obviously, years prior to that, he was behind Brad Treliving as special assistant to the general manager or something like that. Special advisor. And everyone knew that regardless of if it was an inside hire or maybe an outside hire, they were going to have a mess to clean up. This wasn't going to be something that could be fixed overnight. The same way that eating one salad won't make you skinny, eating one burger won't make you fat, and Rome wasn't built in a day. The Calgary Flames organization was not going to be rebuilt in one off season. I would say that Conroy has done a relatively good job. I'm not opposed to how he has gone about things. I understand he has a much better gauge on the market and what's happening than I do sitting in my bedroom. Let's be honest. So I can't sit here and argue that he's done a bad job. Like, sure. Do I question why he waited so long to trade Chris Tanev? Yeah, I do. But you know what? Ultimately, it's done and over with. You're not going to hit them all out of the park. And just the fact that Conroy has done what he's had to do since coming in and has done it relatively well as a first-time general manager, I will give him a lot of credit for that. But prior to his hiring, like a month, so when the season ended, and Brad Treliving announced that the team and him were parting ways, Maloney and Bean did that sounds like a law firm, did a press media availability that a general manager would typically do, on behalf of the organization, and talked about how we're not using the R word. We're not using the word rebuild. The Flames aren't rebuilding. But a few of their actions have kind of matched that, I would say. But at the same time, we have heard that word mentioned a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. Frequently since the end of last season. And I think that everyone in the organization is coming around to the idea of we need to rebuild. Whether this is a Chicago type of rebuild where we rip everything down to the ground and do what we need to do. It's going to take us a few years to build it back up. Or like San Jose, start shipping out your veterans and get that draft capital and work on focusing on the youth allowing these kids into your lineup to play and develop. Even if that means not making the playoffs since your 2019 Stanley Cup run. I would much rather have a few years of bad hockey than continue down the path of mediocrity from the Flames. I'm sorry, but to me, it just doesn't make sense. I think you should want what's best for your hockey team, and you want to win a Stanley Cup, correct? You want the cup to come back to Calgary? So, let's take our medicine, ship off some more veterans, and let the kids come in. I think that that is truly the path I would take, and I understand Craig Conroy. I'm not inside Craig Conroy's brain. I'm not playing Sims with him. I don't have the job of pitching my motives and plans to $1 billion organization and owners that don't care. All they see are dollar signs. They don't care about hockey. So I can sit here and we can all sit here and talk about what's best for the team. But ultimately, at least we don't have to go in front of Murray Edwards and say, "Excuse me, sir, that signs my paycheck and ultimately determines if I am employed or unemployed. I would like to start by trading away Nazem Kadri." Like, I feel like you're going like a peasant going in front of like royalty, like you see in the movies, and you're like begging. Or if you've seen Oliver Twist, "Please, sir, may I have some more?" And it's like, "Please, sir, may I trade some veterans so we can try to rebuild and get some draft capital? Please, sir." That's what it feels like. But it's not all bad. Just because you're having a down season doesn't mean that it's stinky forever. And we're going to talk about how the Flames went from picking in the top 10 to barely missing the playoffs in just one season. Coming up next here on Locked On Flames. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. And I enjoy FanDuel putting together a little same game parlay for a Yankees game or Red Sox game. And I'm very excited to do one for the Flames opening night against Edmonton. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on this fine episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and YouTube. We are here for you throughout the off season, and I couldn't be more excited to eventually give a breakdown of where I think this team will be, what my preseason predictions are, because quite frankly, I don't know. I need a little bit more time to stew. We need to see what they do with Rasmus Anderson and when players start coming back to Calgary, because I am not overly hopeful, but I'm also cautiously optimistic. And I feel like it's a balancing act when you're a Flames fan. But let's talk about the Flames and how they went from picking Zayne Parekh at number 9 and missing the playoffs entirely to being right on the heels of a playoff spot until game 81. Like, to me, the fact that the Flames had the season that they did this year is unbelievable. And it was unexpected, unprecedented, and we're going to talk about that. But let's rewind the clocks a little bit It is the season before last, 38, 39, and 5. You finished with 81 points. You're missing the playoffs. Winning was not on the radar. And I think we could feel the tension in the room. You could see that players were really tired of talking about the potential trades. Okay, this guy moved on. All right, who's next? And it happens. Okay. This is part of one of the first dominoes that fell in Craig Conroy's reign, in his regime. But I think what also played a very large factor into that season was the shaky goaltending. Jacob Markstrom did not have a good season. He had an .892 save percentage and a 2.92 goals against average. You don't want your save percentage to be, I would say, honestly, like 905, I feel like is a decent threshold. And then goals against average is kind of like an outdated stat, but like I feel like anything above a 2.5 is kind of not great. But the Flames benefited from that. And then they draft Zayne Parekh, and it's kind of like, all right, we hit a home run. Let's continue this. We're going to continue down the path of letting our young players in, moving out players that don't want to be here, but keeping the vibes good. That didn't happen. We did see some young players integrate into the lineup, but Conroy ripped the vibes apart when he traded locker room favorite Jacob Pelletier for Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee. How disappointing. How sad. But it is what it is. I mean, ultimately, like, I can't sit here and say, yeah, it did benefit the Flames. Ultimately, it did. I wish he was a Flame again, but good luck in Tampa Bay. I think with these decisions, he has to make the hard decisions. And I talk about it all the time on here. Like, this is a business. Every single person involved knows that this is a business. But going from very bad goaltending and low offense to great goaltending with Dustin Wolf, even with a depleted and gutted defense, with no offense, and barely missing the playoffs, like that is a huge step. And that is not where anyone expected the Flames to be. I remember doing a preseason prediction show last summer with JD Young from Locked On Sharks, and he said the Sharks are going to have more points than the Flames. I wish that was true. But I would like for that to be more true this year because the draft is a lot deeper this year. But anyways, regardless, when you look at the Flames' issues since Johnny and Tkachuk's departures, the biggest issue has been scoring. The Flames have not had a consistent scorer. They have great young talent in Coronado, but he is not an elite player. The Flames they lost a lot of elite talent in one summer. And you don't just find that again in one player, let alone replacing two players. So you have Coronado, like I mentioned, and you have Zary. And those two young guys, I think, are ones that will continue to drive a lot of the offense, along with Kadri. And you're hoping to get another 20-goal season out of Huberdeau. But can you realistically expect that from Huberdeau, who has not had a lot of great seasons in Calgary, and Kadri, who's like 35 years old. I just don't think it's realistic to expect the Flames to hang around the way that they did this season. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that they need another few drafts, to be entirely honest, of picking in the top 10 or top 5, because that is where you're going to find your elite talent. That is where you're going to find your Misas, you're going to find your Schaefers, you're going to find your Celebrinis. Like, that is where those players are. And it is so good that the Flames are able to snag Coronado at 13. But realistically, you're not going to get that every draft. And it's time for them to claw their way out of the mushy middle and just figure it out. Like, even if it means taking this step back. And we're going to talk about why being bad is okay for this long-term plan, coming up next on Locked On Flames. Thanks, everyone, for making the show part of your day. And make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast, as well as YouTube. And you're following me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. There has been so much discourse, okay? So much discourse surrounding the Flames and the direction that they pick, the lack of moves, the moves so far. And I'm tired. I feel like a child of divorce, standing here in the middle, like watching my friends on one side make a really good argument. And then on the other side, I'm like, yeah, no, you're also making another really good argument. I just want to have civilized conversations and raise some critical, just things that come to mind. Raise some points. And I think that the biggest argument that I've seen is that, oh, you're mad, not me, but in general, team tank, I guess this is directed at. You want the Flames to tank, but you're mad when they lose. To me, I think Team Tank is mad when they lose because it is, I don't want to say mad, but it's because it was such a discouraging loss, and they're also not losing enough. And I know you can be Team Tank or team here for a good time and just enjoy the game. I think everyone has something to offer analytically, feedback wise, and just thoughts on their favorite hockey team. We don't need to have a dissertation. Every Twitter thread I've seen recently has been, well, actually, Craig Conroy, he has to salvage his NHL GM reputation. Not really. If you're in on the salvage joke, you know. But to me, the Flames have to build. Well, first, rewind. They need to tear down a little bit more. We know it's not going to be to the studs. We know it's not going to be a full fire sale. They are never trading. They will not trade Lomberg. They will not trade Joel Hanley. The market for Nazem Kadri is it's slim because he obviously has most control over where he goes. And teams don't have the assets the Flames want. I don't think they trade Blake Coleman because the guys that they need to move are ones all with no movement or no trade clauses or approved team lists, which they have earned. And those players are not required to waive those. So you're working with a select number of teams. And if none of those teams give you have anything to offer you, do you go to your player and say, hey, thanks so much for putting in all of this work, but we're thinking of trading you. How do you feel about waiving this? They don't have to say anything. They can say, no, I'm here. My life is here. My family's here. Why? I like what we have going on here. I feel like I've been a big part of this locker room. And this isn't one of the things that I want to do. That's fine. I don't expect anyone to fully be on board. Like Jacob Markstrom waiving his no trade clause or his no movement clause is huge. The fact that he was able to do that for the Flames was huge. And I don't blame Rasmus Andersson for not wanting to waive his. Ultimately, this is like if your boss came up to you and said, hey, we're going to transfer you to this department. Even though you have a contract, we're thinking of transferring you to this department, even though you have a contract with this current department. What are your thoughts? I would look at my boss and ask if they were crazy. And I think a lot of people would. And it is a business. And I talk about that all the time on the show. However, there is no reason to not make the hard moves. Conroy showed us last season that he is capable of doing it. The fact that he traded away Jacob Pelletier, who wasn't necessarily a star athlete, but he brought the energy and the passion and the speed to the Flames room and on the ice. They traded that away. So I think if they can do that, there's really no reason why you shouldn't explore other options. And they talk about being so worried about the room. But can you really tolerate another year of losing? Like, the Panthers have gone to 3 Stanley Cup finals in a row, okay? The Flames have missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. Do you want to make it a 4th? I personally think we should. Just because they need to they have to bottom out in order to make any sort of true progress in this rebuild, especially with how deep and how deep this upcoming draft is. It is huge that they do what they can to get their hands on a top goal scorer. Trade your players, get some draft capital, stock up, and start integrating more players into the lineup, because there's no reason to hold these guys back. They've earned it. And that'll do it for me here on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And you can follow me on Twitter at JustBelmosto. I will be back tomorrow. I'm just going to keep saying it every day, hopefully with some Connor Zary contract extension update, or maybe a whole new extension. Wouldn't that be great? Craig Conroy, please compromise and just give Zary what he wants. And that'll do it for me here on today's episode, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.